Hey, you guys want to talk some neuroscience with me? Sorry. Okay, but it actually is very interesting. And if you have ADHD, especially, I think it'll help you understand yourself a little bit better. So in neuroscientific research, we've known for a long time that there are different areas of the brain that are involved in ADHD, and different areas of the brain are affected in different ways. One thing that is a little bit newer as far as theories go is this understanding that it's not just the areas of the brain themselves that play a role, but also how those areas of the brain talk to one another. It can get a little bit confusing because there are so many different networks and they're all named different complicated names and they all have like multiple different names. But for our purposes, one of the more important ones is called the default mode network, or DMN. So the DMN is composed of a bunch of different brain areas that talk to each other when the brain is in something called a wakeful rest. So that means you're not necessarily sleeping, but you're also probably not super focused on a task. So you're doing something like maybe daydreaming or just letting your mind wander. There are lots of other times when the DMN is active as well, including things like when you're thinking about yourself, when you're thinking about other people, when you're thinking outside of the present. So maybe things that aren't happening right then, but maybe you're thinking about the past or the future. And the reason that we know that these processes cause the default mode network to be active is because we see changes in the blood flow of the brain and the way the brain uses oxygen and glucose when someone is engaged in those tasks. So we see these areas of the default mode network lighting up when, say, you're thinking about yourself or thinking about the past, or maybe just letting your mind wander. So when is the DMN, or the default mode network, not as active? Generally, that's when you're actually engaging and focused on a task. So I'm way oversimplifying all of this, but we can kind of think of the DMN as the thinking self, or the part of the brain that thinks about thinking, whereas other brain networks are involved more in actually doing tasks and focusing on things and committing them to memory. Again, way oversimplified, not entirely true, but for our purposes, it works. So cool as hell, right? But wait, there's more. So in someone with ADHD, there are differences in the default mode network compared to people who don't have ADHD. And oftentimes this is something like hyperactivation of the default mode network, meaning that it's overactive and it's more difficult for us to dampen down the default mode network or turn it off when we need to be focusing on a task. There's also evidence that people with ADHD have difficulty with the part of the brain that facilitates switching between the DMN and other brain networks that are involved in focusing. So it actually makes a lot of sense in ADHD. If you can't suppress that default mode network as effectively, your mind is going to be more apt to wander than another person's mind. If you can't switch from the default mode network to another network, like one that you use to focus, it's going to be more difficult for you to switch tasks or to focus on things. It kind of makes a lot of sense, right? It's interesting. As an aside, this is just sort of my own personal theory, but I know a lot of people with ADHD are extremely creative and get, really passionately moved by creative works. And there was this paper that came out in 2019 that showed that the DMN, the default mode network, is really active, surprisingly so, when you're taking in something beautiful, when you're looking at something aesthetically. And I think that's really cool too. So it kind of explains why maybe some people with ADHD feel things more strongly than others, or appreciate these beautiful things that maybe other people would overlook. So anyways, the DMN and other brain networks have been increasingly implicated and understood in the context of multiple different psychiatric disorders and just in the way our brains think in general. And it's all cool as hell and it makes a lot of sense for ADHD. And I'm sorry again for oversimplifying it, but it's just cool. So yeah, let me know if you want to talk more about it, you nerds. Okay, bye.